Good evening, folks. Today we're working on plant-based recipes. Now, that does not mean that they're vegan recipes, that they are by and large derived from plants, and that's what you're going to recognize through this. As I produce the recipes, I'll talk about some substitutions that you could consider for making it more vegan, so it is 100% plant-based, but for the most part, we're using plants in the majority of the food product. So we're going to make a couscous salad. It's nice and clean, very healthy, and we're going to start with a vegetable stock made from a variety of vegetables, mostly root vegetables. It consisted of celery, onion, carrot. It had leeks. We did add some mushroom to that, a little bit of tomato product. We had some turnips and fennel. All of those vegetables were slowly simmered in this water with a sachet or a little pouch, like a tea bag, of some various herbs. I'm going to allow that vegetable stock to come to a boil, and once it comes to a boil, I'm going to reduce it down to a simmer and allow the couscous to simmer just briefly. This is a no-egg couscous, really small pearls of a pasta per se, and so that is the main part of that. We have some other ingredients related to that couscous salad, and that consists of some chopped green bell pepper, red bell pepper. We have onion, cucumber, some olives, and then there's a dairy product in this you can opt out of, and that is a feta cheese made from sheep's milk. We're going to touch that again a little bit later. There's also a vinaigrette that comes with that goes with that particular couscous salad that we'll make shortly. We're going to be working on a falafel, which I made the falafel mix for you ahead of time, largely due to the time and the process it takes to be able to make that happen. And I wanted to share that when I made the falafel mix, I used an egg replacer versus an egg. And because we made this in advance, I shared with you the recipe to be able to make the falafel on your own at home. And that is where you're going to find that it shows that it has a whole egg in it. So that whole egg can be replaced with egg replacer that you can find at some of those stores that are more focused on health and nutrition. Let's say, for example, Whole Foods is definitely a good option. Some stores from Trader Joe's have it, Lucky's, Fresh Time. Most of those, Raisin Rack and Westerville, all those pretty much have a pretty good slant toward healthy food product. So I'm going to actually start with the preparation of the falafel and with the couscous salad, because both of those are going to get cooked and they take a little bit of time to be able to get finished off. So I'm using a 10-inch skillet, 12-inch skillet, either works. And you're going to prepare yourself a plate or a tray that you may have at home to be able to use for flouring and dusting the falafel patties that you're going to make. And I use these little dishers here in the instructional kitchen just to be able to get a portion control on that. I mean, you can use a spoon and kind of measure and evaluate the size you're going to have. So this little disher is a 30, which means 30 of these little scoops will equate to a quart. And this falafel mix is already made. It's got a nice consistency to it. I'm just going to scoop out some of these so they're all consistent in size. And with those falafel patties, we are going to make a little sandwich that is going to be, we're going to use a naan bread, which is a delicious bread that is dairy free, and that does have gluten, but it's a very nice bread. We see it a lot in India in the use of food in preparation. So now I have that falafel scooped out. The vegetable stock has come to a boil. I'm going to add the couscous. And again, I'm going to let it come back to a boil just briefly. While that's happening, I'm going to come back to the falafel and use a little bit of flour that we provided. And I'm going to roll the falafel in the flour. Each one of them. Kind of just rolling them like you would enrobe a cookie. A holiday time, let's say, for example, you're enrolling that in powdered sugar. One of those Mexican tea cakes or Italian wedding cakes. Each country has their own version of that. But you want to get them enrobed in flour. And that's going to be help hold these together during the cooking process. The couscous has now come back to a boil. I'm going to turn that down to a low simmer, very slow simmer. And then I have made for myself a little lid. You can use a plate at home, whatever works for you. It doesn't really even need very much heat. Just needs a very, very small amount of heat. You can even have offset heat for that. You're going to preheat that skillet and add the measure of oil that's on your trays or in your kits to be able to get that oil hot enough to come to a shimmer. So if your if your skillet is preheated, it's not going to take long. Now that I've got these little falafel patties floured, I'm simply going to shape them so that they can meet the guideline of having some consistency in cooking. I'm going to test that oil to see if it's hot enough. If I put the flour in the skillet and I see some activity and it's moving, then I know that the oil is hot enough to start adding the falafel patties. You add them too early, and unfortunately you're going to absorb a lot of the oil in that little falafel patty, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for some activity in that skillet as soon as that falafel hits it. So take your time. Don't overwork them because they will tend to fall apart, and they're set up at the right measure of moisture at this point in time. If they get too much flour, add a little bit of liquid. Water will do the job to be able to get them to be that consistent state. They're almost like a super soft meatball is what you're looking at. And I do try to handle them delicately and maintain their shape and form as I put them in the skillet. And I don't mess with them once they go in the skillet. I let them do their job and just start to brown up on both sides. We're going to let them cook fully on one side. Everything in there is cooked because we used an egg replacer. So getting it hot in the center is going to be sufficient to be able to get these to cook. But I personally think it's in our best interest to have a nice, wonderful, crisp exterior on these falafel so that you can enjoy the taste that it gets from the caramelization of the products that are in there, the vegetables that were ground. Chickpeas is the primary ingredient of that falafel. So it really is quite good. And you'll notice these in street vendors. See a lot of these in some of the food trucks that we have out there. You go to any kind of any type of a one of those street fairs or a carnival, you'll see a lot of falafel today in the operations out there. So I'm going to move over to the blender and to the food processor. We're going to do some food processing while this couscous is pretty much turned off. I'm going to put the heat back on. It's just a super low heat. It really doesn't need to have really any movement, just a low temperature. And what's going to happen is that temperature is going, that vegetable stock is going to absorb into the little pearls of the couscous. These falafels are moving along quite nicely. You can see that activity in the oil, and that's just fine. I don't want to have too high, control the heat, so you have a slow movement of the oil around there. So as I go to the food processor, this is a rather large one, and for that, in the ingredient list that you have in your kits, you're going to have the chickpeas. And those chickpeas have got a fair amount of water in there. I don't think it's a good idea to use all the water. So I'm going to pull some of the water out of there and reserve it because we may or may not need all that water from the chickpea in the process of making this hummus. This hummus, I think you're going to find, is superior to what we normally would buy in the grocery store. It has a lot of preservatives added to it, and it doesn't have the taste and the fresh flavor that you'll get from this. So the chickpeas go into the food processor, and it also is going to get some other ingredients that are really flavorful to make that dish pretty exceptional. And some of those ingredients are going to be a roasted garlic. Most of the couscous that we have or that we see recipes for is fresh garlic. And to me, it's very, very bitter, a little bit too strong. So I take those garlic cloves and roast them in oil, drain the oil off, and use that for other applications. You actually have it on your tray as the oil measure for the pitas that you have. So I'm going to take that roasted garlic in the Robocoo or the food processor with the chickpeas. And I'm going to put in tahini, which is a ground sesame seeds. It turns into a paste. And if the oil has separated, which it shouldn't have, just simply stir it together so that they are reincorporated. We also have a little dash of cayenne pepper to give us a little bit of heat. It's not that much to make that big of a difference. And then I also have some ground cumin. Ground cumin, I think, makes it very, very flavorful, and it reminds me of the flavors that we get from the Middle East. And so I like hummus with the cumin in there. So once I've got the lid on, I'm going to start the pulse and allow those chickpeas to break up a little bit along with the garlic and the sesame paste until they start to make some movement, and they're gonna spin and start to look like a peanut butter per se. At that point, when they get to that degree of refinement, I'm going to scrape down the sides because there are going to be some splatter of those chickpeas that we want to make sure that we don't have that chunky texture of those chickpeas. And by leaving some of the water out, it gives me the liberties of being able to control the consistency of this hummus when it's being made. So this is kind of heavy. Now, some of you may like a heavy hummus. Some of you may like a softer hummus. So this is where you make a decision on how much of that water that from the chickpeas that you put back into the process. So I'm going to put in maybe about half of it, but I'm going to keep my eyes on it as it's working. So it's a nice, smooth, creamy consistency because it depends on what you're going to do with it. You might use it as a spread to make a sandwich with or a wrap. Maybe you're using it as a dip for a tailgate this coming weekend when we get back on the field. Depending upon your preference of how thick you want it to be will determine how much liquid you add to it. You have the juice of a lemon, which I like to make sure I don't get the seeds in there. So you can juice it with a juicer or simply just extract the juice out of the lemon and be conscientious that the seeds don't go in there with it. You don't need to have a lemon squeezer. You can certainly do it by hand very easily, trying to catch those seeds. I'll let a couple of them slip by, so I'm going to give it another go. A little strainer would be good, but you know, if I'm at home, that's more stuff to wash. So I'm always thinking about that. Lemon juice while it's running. And then you also have a little measure of oil that's going to go into the machine. You have a little bit of parsley that's on your tray or in your meal kit. That's going to be used as an accent garnish for the finish of the hummus. So that's really all there is to it. You can certainly salt and pepper the dish if you like. I'm going to give it a taste to see how that is, to see if we need to take that action or not. I'm going to come back to the skillet with the falafel, and we're going to give those falafel a flip over so we get a nice golden color on them. You can see that they have that nice crisp crust on the exterior, which is exactly what we're looking for. We didn't fiddle with them. We let them cook and we let them do their job. You can identify the starts to crack at the surface. That's a pretty good indicator that the egg replacer is doing its job and having them soften up a bit. I'm going to take a quick peek at the couscous. Looks pretty good. It has absorbed all of the liquid. And what I would do at home is I would take a tray or a plate and I would put the couscous on a tray lined with some film wrap or a piece of parchment paper if you've got it. You'll find that in the aisles at the store where they do baked goods. And I'm going to let this cool down because I don't want it to be too hot when we add the vinaigrette. It's kind of a warm salad, kind of a cool couscous salad. This is delicious for lunch tomorrow. You can make all these things today and then have a couple, 3 meals out of all these things that we're working on today. There's just a lot of various items that can be used at another time. So once you turn those over, reduce the heat on the falafel very, very much so that it's very little movement on those falafel patties. We're going to let this cool down in another area of the kitchen. You can put it in your refrigerator if you want, but it does warm up the rest of the food that's in there. So we're going to taste this hummus and see if it has a correct balance and see if it needs salt and pepper. I think it is great just like that. A little bit of cayenne pepper gives it a nice flavor. The brine that those chickpeas are packed in has already got a little bit of sodium in it, and I don't want to add too much more to it, so I'm going to leave it just like that. Meanwhile, I'm going to work at the blender. In the blender, we're going to make a Caesar dressing. This is where some alterations will need to come into play based on if you are of a vegan diet. If that's your intention and preference, then you want to be conscientious of that. So you're going to have a fresh lemon, and for that lemon, we're going to juice that lemon. And these are the kind of things you might want to do in advance so that that lemon juice is already done. So you have the lemon juice, hopefully without any seeds. And we're going to start out in that blender with a little bit of Dijon mustard, dropping it down into the blender cavity. A couple whole cloves of garlic. We're not going to chop them because the machine's going to do that for us. We have some anchovy fillets, which are a part of the seafood world, not a plant. That certainly can be omitted from that. And then we have egg yolk, which is going to be a thickening agent, which is also not a plant item. So think about that when you are making this dish. You can use other options to thicken this with. It could simply just be an egg-free mayonnaise that you could use to be able to thicken this up with. So I'm going to let these ingredients blend together. And as they're blending, I'm going to slowly pour in the measure of olive oil. And that's going to make this Caesar dressing rather thick. You could do this by hand, but it's difficult to get that to be nice and smooth and creamy if we do. You've got a measure of grated Parmesan cheese from cow's milk, so opt out on that if you're looking for a completely plant-based or vegan-style dressing here. And you're going to put in some of the grated Parmesan in that dressing. Some of it you're going to reserve on the side to be able to accent that with. I'm going to let that dressing finish off. And this dressing in particular almost always needs milled pepper to finish it off with. And so I have the pepper mill, or you can use ground pepper, certainly your choice. But I think it has that nice bright flavor. Sometimes you can opt out and just mill the pepper on top of the salad as you make it. So we're going to let that rest until we come back to finish off that salad. All right, now our couscous is cooling down. We have those ingredients for the couscous salad sitting by waiting. We have the ingredients for the hummus sitting by waiting. And I'm going to take a moment to grill the pita. The pita, you've got a couple of different pitas, and you got a couple slices of naan bread. The naan doesn't really require any oil because we're going to have some oil transferred from the falafel onto the naan. But I do like to put them on the grill just to kind of warm them up, give them some flexibility, because we're going to make a little sandwich out of those. For the pita, I've got a little bit of that garlic oil, and we're going to just take, these are whole wheat pitas for better health and nutrition, made from the whole grain. We're going to rub some of that oil on both sides of that pita to be able to give it some really nice flavor. This would be a great dish that you could save for the game on Saturday. It would be a really nice treat to have. Something good and good for you. It beats a bag of Doritos, that's for sure. So after I've got those nicely coated, I'm going to sprinkle on some Moroccan spices, which has the base ingredient of these spices is za'atar, which is a wonderful flavoring agent. It's got some ground coriander, some cumin, really nice flavors from the Middle East. I hope that you will like it. It's got a little turmeric involved in the preparation. We're going to get that on there so that it just adds more flavor to the finished hummus. And I don't know too many people that don't really like it a lot. So I'm going to let the heat of the grill do its job on those. Do you have to grill it? No, you sure don't. You could put those in the oven. If you have a setting on your stovetop as a low broil, feel free to put them at that low broil stage. and that will work just as well. So for these falafel, they have now browned on both sides. I'm going to take them out of that skillet and let them rest on some type of absorbent towel. Here in the instructional kitchen, we'll use a single-use towel, and those are pretty hygienic. Some of the towels we use at home, the paper towels from certain companies, are more hygienic than others. It really depends on who and what you buy, where you buy them from, what the composition of the manufacturer is on those. So we're going to just get a little bit of toasting on those. So I'm going to let these rest off to the side and come back to those here shortly. Meanwhile, I'm going to make a little the dressing that we're going to use for the vinaigrette. The vinaigrette dressing we're going to use for the couscous salad. So for that, we got lemon juice once again. And again, I would say if you're going to do these recipes all back to back like I did, save yourself the trouble and get these items juiced before you start, so you're not having to stop in the middle of business to get that done. So I'm going to make sure I don't get the seeds involved in this. I'm draining them off. And then I'm going to go in with all the other ingredients that are related. I've got mustard, which is going to make this dressing a little bit of flavor, a little flavorful. And I'm going to use a little bit of Spanish paprika to give us some taste, a little bit of raw garlic that's been chopped ahead of time. And then you have honey. If you don't want to use honey, I would ask you to consider an agave nectar. It come from a cactus would work out fairly well. Maple syrup would work out well. It may sound a little funky to use in a dressing for couscous, but you'd be surprised that it actually has a pretty good flavor. Or you can opt out on any sweetener and just make a mustard vinaigrette. So having some activity with the garlic and the mustard, you're going to slowly stream in the oil that you have. There's a 50% olive and 50% canola oil. And the mustard is going to help emulsify it, kind of hold the two properties together, as will the honey help emulsify that. I can smell the non-toasting a little bit. Smells like the toaster at home for breakfast. I'm going to flip them over so I can manage the heat. One side of this grill is a little hotter than another, so I'm going to be conscientious of that. Just want to warm them up, get some nice grill marks. Some of that nice toasty flavor is going to be good with that hummus. So we're coming back to the vinaigrette. We're basically just whisking in vigorously the oil into those ingredients, the garlic, the honey, the mustard, so it's nice, creamy, and smooth. Salt and pepper is going to be a nice finish for this. So we'll add that to it. That paprika gives it a nice, interesting cast of color. I think that some may or some may not like that. It really depends. And again, you have options at home to do what you wish when it comes to flavoring your dishes, your recipes that you're making. Incorporate those in there. And you may not need all of that dressing. I think it's pretty good. I like it. I always have. And that's why I'm sharing it with you this evening. Couscous is cooled down, but I consider it sufficiently enough to be able to put into the dressing. I'm going to pull off the naan breads, and I'm going to pull off the two pitas and set them off to the side where they can stay in indirect heat and stay warm. Now the couscous can very easily get back into, I don't try to put it in the refrigerator, not too long, because if you do, you're going to find that it's going to get really thick and dense. Just long enough to be able to get it to cool down so it's not hot to touch. Get these guys out of our way. Just simply folding in that dressing. Really quite nice. It's going to enrobe those little pearls. Because we didn't rinse it, they still have some of the starch properties in that couscous to be able to make it glutinous. And then we're going to add in the remaining ingredients that we held back, which are the chopped olive. And again, all these are optional. It's up to you. We have diced cucumber, we have diced red onion, green bell pepper, red bell pepper. You also have feta cheese, and again, your choice on that item. If you do or do not want that item, it's up to you. Feta is a nice Mediterranean accent for this dish, but I try to put that on at the end because I think it's very, very powerful and it breaks down relatively quickly, and it may not be the ideal situation for us to look at. So this will rest for a moment. This would work very nicely in a bowl, but I'm going to put it into a cup today, and we're going to let it rest. So this would be a wonderful lunch for you to make for another day. And I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of feta on top of that dish to make this nice little couscous salad. And again, the feta is optional. There's some dairy-free cheeses out there that I think would work out really nice. I do think that a little milled pepper on top of that feta would be sporty. And I have a little left parsley that you have on your tray with your hummus. I'm going to use a little bit of that just to accent garnish that. We'll come back and take a look at that at the end of the demo. Next, I want to be able to do a presentation of the hummus. So I'm just going to take the bowl from the food processor, and we're going to bring it over here where we can have a pretty good view of that. Using a spatula, we're going to take the hummus from there and present it however you wish. I like to have it in a bowl. Some people just simply spread it on a plate. It's really your preference on how you want to present this. But the hummus is a nice consistency. You can see that it's got a nice texture to it, very nice and soft. But I can tell you that it smells absolutely divine. I love it. I could eat it almost every day. I don't eat the things I like the most every day because I don't want to burn out on them. But I do think that they have a lot of reward. You're only going to live so long. You may as well eat what you like the time you got left. You never know what tomorrow looks like. This is wonderful with some fresh crudité vegetable, which is why I think it'd be a good choice for a tailgate, because you can serve this very nicely with your friends and stuff to be able to have a good, healthy option. Again, opting out on Doritos and going with something that's a plant-based type item. A little parsley around the outside, not necessary. I just like the look of it. We're going to go to the pitas. I'm going to just cut those pitas in whatever size you want. To me, that's kind of filling. They have a little pita and some vegetables. Absolutely wonderful to serve with the hummus. Just after you've got them cut into wedges, just kind of fan them out around the plate with the hummus. And now you can see where you could a little spreader on those little pitas and have a wonderful little snack that maybe you want to have Doritos with that so you don't miss out on anything. That's really an option. Next to last, I'm going to put together the Caesar salad. So we have the Caesar dressing that we crafted. I'm going to give it one more pulse on the blender just to reincorporate all those ingredients. And let that rest. And in the bowl, just a plain stainless steel bowl, we're going to put in the lettuce. This is basically romaine hearts that have just been chopped. I'm going to pour in the amount of dressing that I might think would be ideal. Many of you may like less, some of you may like more. If you have a dressing in your refrigerator and you like to have that instead of this egg that's in this vinaigrette, feel free to use that today so you can have that option. Pair of tongs, you just kind of simply toss this lettuce greens with that dressing. Some like the croutons incorporated in with the lettuce greens, but croutons are very popular in a Caesar salad. And believe it or not, this salad was actually created in Tijuana, Mexico. The creator of this salad was living in San Francisco and then moved down to San Diego, actually made this salad popular in Tijuana, made its way into San Diego and San Francisco. And that, according to legend, I found multiple resources where that's factual, but who knows? There's a lot of non-fact information out there that we're getting from a lot of resources. To finish this off, a little bit of croutons that you have, and then the remaining shredded Parmesan cheese, again from cow's milk We'll come back, take a look at that in a moment. Finishing with the falafel. These nice little falafel sandwiches are going to be built with these naan breads. You've got some picks in your kit that you can use to be able to deliver the dream. And I've got a lot of options for you. You've got some dairy products, some sour cream. You could use a non-dairy sour cream. A lot of folks have that stuff out there. You could put a little hummus in there to spread it on the naan bread. And you can just put a couple of these naans or a couple of the falafel in that naan bread. It's really kind of big. Making them oval shape might be better. Put in some chopped tomato in there. Makes it a nice little tasty little dish. A little bit of shredded lettuce. Tough to work with. If I'm at home, I'm using my hands. If I'm in an environment where I have serving guests, I'm going to use utensils. I made some pickled onion for you to make that a little briny. Nice interesting flavor you'll get from that. And then we have some sliced cucumbers, which I think brighten it up a little bit, give us a nice interesting flavor. And again, you could use some type of an adhesive spread if you wanted to be able to make that dish pretty special. It could be the hummus, it could be the sour cream. It really depends on what your preference is. We got some picks to be able to put this little sandwich together with and present that on a plate. You can make them both, one with and one without the sour cream. The sour cream, I like it because I like the flavor of it. I also like the fact that it holds the little pieces of falafel in place. And these are pretty big. You know, this is a jawbreaker per se, so you can decide how you can just take one of those falafels, split it in half, and certainly get the job done and have more falafel. You can eat it without the bread if you wanted to. I think the cucumbers make a big difference, so I'm going to add that to both of them. And then pick them to keep them closed. You could use the pitas for this dish also if you wanted to, and just have the falafel or the naan bread for to serve with your hummus. There's a lot of options out there. There's no rules. You folks do what you want with those items that you have there to work with. I took a couple of scallions and just made some brushes out of them just to be able to accent garnish some of these dishes with. So I'm going to do a presentation of all those finished dishes for you so you can take a look at them all at once. And so we have the hummus with the grilled pita bread. We'll use a couple of those little scallion brushes just to be able to give it an accent garnish to that, to give it some kind of character. We have the Caesar salad, which is nicely finished with those croutons. We have the couscous salad, nicely prepared. The more time that it has to rest, the more it's going to solidify together. So you could too also turn that out to have a nice little presentation on that. And then the naan bread with the falafel is our last dish that we have to take a look at in its entirety. So that we have these 4 dishes for us to be able to have, I might think certainly more than one meal. Some of this stuff would be great to translate and move toward our tailgate this weekend when we take on Nebraska. And I hopefully you enjoyed your kind of soda plant-based meal this evening. And if you have any questions, I'll stand by for our Q&A after our demonstration this evening. All right, enjoy.